Welcome to the Beltway Broadcast, the premier podcast for the workplace learning and talent development professionals of the Association for Talent Development's Metro DC chapter. We've got some great resources in store for you today.
Hello, fellow ATDers. I'm Christina Eanes, owner of Eanes Training, as well as a chapter past president and a member of the pod squad here at the Metro DC chapter of ATD.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie Hubka, and I'm the managing partner of Produce Learning. And like Chris, I am also a past president of the chapter as well as a member of our pod squad.
Now, we also have our producer behind the scenes, Halyna Hodges. And for this episode, we're interviewing Bob Mosher. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, friends, welcome. Excited to be here. Thanks so much. Looking forward to the dialogue.
Now, before we get into our topic of the 5 moments of need, can you share a little bit about your background with our listeners and viewers?
Happy to do that. In fact, that's a wonderful entree to the question. This is my 41st year in education. I may be in it longer than some are alive on this in your listening group. But it started. I come from a family of educators. My mom was a school teacher, sisters, and so on. And so I followed in rank and started out in elementary ed, of all things, in here in the States, up in upstate New York, small dairy town in Warsaw, New York. And then I got my master's in computer education, and that thrust me into the adult ed world about 36 years ago. Since then, I've been a part of a large e-learning company. It became Skillsoft. You may know them by that brand. Mm-hmm. I was the senior director of learning and strategy evangelism for Microsoft at one point. I mean, you guys, I've worn many hats. Currently, I am the co-founder of an organization called APPLY Synergies, which is where the 5 moments of need came about. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a little bit and give you a little more backstory.
Awesome. Well, I mean, let's get into it. So the 5 moments of need, this is a lot of stuff. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's sort of continue the journey into this, if that would make sense, because hopefully it'll resonate with your listeners. I was a tried and true trainer, friends. I mean, it was my background. I was an ISD, instructional systems designer, all the acronyms we use. Again, for a very, very successful IT training company in Rochester, New York. And then I got this wonderful opportunity to go to Microsoft and be this terrific role. And so here I am, right? I'm 15 some odd years into my career. I love IT. I'm hired by Microsoft. I have the senior role, level or 2 away from Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer at the time we were CEOs. I mean, I had PhDs in my staff. I mean, we had award-winning curriculum. I mean, you guys, at Microsoft, for God's sake. I mean, I was like, I'm going to ride this, into the sunset. And then I ran headlong into this problem where when I went out to those we served, and I'm awful carefully because this isn't accusatory at all about the journey we were on, but it was an awakening for me in that everyone I spoke to, every tech I spoke to, we served over 9 million or something at the time. They said, look, your classes are great. Love the trainers, lunch is terrific. The course, the curriculum, it sits by my desk. I never put it away, blah, blah, blah. But, I struggle applying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I struggle, there's a lot of acronyms, tons of material. The labs were great, but darn it, when I came back to my network, I struggled running one. And I remember coming back, you guys, from that going, okay, look, something's fundamentally broken here to me then. Meaning, if we have all these accolades around our efforts, industry awards, blah, blah, and I have remarkable people, some of the best I'd ever worked with. I got the brand of Microsoft and the money, frankly, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm still getting this I can't apply thing. What's broken here? And I met this brilliant man, Dr. Conrad Gottfredson out of BYU, who was experimenting with this idea that just maybe training alone is not enough. Mm-hmm. And he introduced me to the 5 moments of need. And I was like, oh my Lord, where has this been throughout my experience, my journey, my pedigree, right? And he showed me when he looked at our program, he said, look, I want to be awful careful here. This is stunning training. I mean, I get it. I get why this is award-winning training. The reality is you asked the learner a very different question. You didn't ask them how training went. Didn't ask them if they, I kind of asked some of those, but your question was, how's the application going? Mm-hmm. And they came back and said, well, you know what? I'm struggling in that part of the journey. And he said, that's because in L&D, we've been a little short-sighted in our understanding of the performance. He's very careful about this performance journey of those we serve, not the learning journey, not the training journey, but the performance journey. He said, really, the reality is, and he coined this framework. He said, training has historically been very good at the first two moments of need, which he calls new and more. So new is I don't have a clue. I don't know Excel. I don't know leadership. And so I go to this remarkable course. I'm filled with the knowledge, understanding, may practice or role play, and so now I have an understanding of leadership. More is when I'm a leader and we pivot on, I don't know, name the leadership program, right? We decide to go towards such and such. And so I fundamentally I don't need new, but I need more, right? And so, and I look back in my career, you guys, at the time and said, my gosh, that's what I did. That's what my group did. We were stunning at that. But he said, the reality is, through to competency and performance, learners have three more: apply, change, and solve. And he goes, when people enter the workflow, they have to then take that wonderful experience and apply it contextually to their work. Their work changes. They, look at the world we live in, right? So what was right Friday is no longer correct Monday. So how do I get caught up? And finally I screw up. I journey into something I may know, but based on context or whatever, I have a problem to be solved. And he said, historically, we've not targeted those last three intentionally in our designs. And you guys, it was transformational for me. Because when I went back to Microsoft and sat down with my group and looked at what we made, I said, you guys, my gosh, we have nailed moments one and two. But I asked about apply, change, and solve. Yeah. Right. And our text came back and said, I'm struggling there. And that, guys, 20 years ago, that changed my trajectory in my work. And I left Microsoft in great standing, but I really wanted to dip my toe deeper into this other world about how we can be more intentional in L&D to be there. And that's kind of where I sit today. Those are the 5 moments.
I love the overview, and I especially love your story, because as you were sharing your journey through this realization that it's not really about just these first 2 moments of need, which I think many of us are familiar with. There are really many more, 3 others, in fact, that we really need to focus on. I feel like that's something very relatable. Many of us have a story that would align very well to yours because we've experienced that. We've seen that. I would love to hear you tell us a little bit more about those, the other 3. We know quite a bit about the first 2. And a big reason for that is I feel like a lot of us approach training, especially instructional design, delivery, the same way for anything. Maybe it's a crisis of imagination. Maybe it's because we think we're doing what we're supposed to do, but you really do need a different perspective or a different approach for those 3. Tell us about that.
Stephanie, God bless you, because boy, you nailed like the next 3 years of my life after doing this.
There you go.
Because it was spectacular because after I get over the euphoria of this framework, and again, I want to be awful careful in our time here because vocabulary is important in my opinion. Right? We throw words around: learning, training, performance, and I don't think they all mean the same thing.
They don't.
Right? And so Kahn is very careful that 5 moments in need is a framework, not a methodology, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Because what happened to me, you guys, is I have not done the 5 moments in need for anyone. L&D, line of business, CFO, non-training folks, and everyone doesn't go, oh my God, I get it. Totally get it. Makes great sense. The problem is I'm an ID, right? I'm in L&D. My next question is, and I do that how? I mean, it's because I was raised in ADDIE. If that acronym, rings a bell to you at all, right? I have a master's level in education of a degree, and so I know all the learning science. I know all the theorists, and what I was dogged with through that, understandably, is look, we don't wing it. We follow methodology for a reason because what we do is important, and we have to have a defendable, scalable, replicable, measurable way to do what we do. Right. And so my next question to Kahn who's now my business partner, by the way, in my company. I said, dude, so I don't know how to do this. I'll be completely transparent. I get the concept, but when I go back to go for apply, solve, and change, I got nothing. I mean, I really don't know how to design for those moments. I know how to design for new and more.
Yeah.
And so he said, okay, look, so if I may get a little technical on you here for a second, he said, okay, although it wasn't called this at the time, this is 50 years of his life work. He's a PhD in instructional psychology and technology. And he ran into this early in his career too. So he has since, and I can give you references after if it's helpful and so on, white papers and things. But he said, look, our ADDIE is something called ENABLE, ENLABLE, engage to align. It's an acronym, right? And he said, look, you need it because you're right. We need a way to go into SMEs. We need a way to go into a performance problem and analyze it effectively and come out with a deliverable, right? Yeah. So a couple fundamental things in that this is helpful. Number one is it's now being kind of coined as workflow learning, if you've heard those terms at all, in the industry, right? It used to be called performance support. If you're old enough to remember that world, or EPSS, if you even go back even further in the space, but that's kind of the maturity of this discipline, and it's kind of settled on workflow learning. I like it because it kind of speaks to what it does. The other ones, I don't know if they necessarily did, but the key word in that frame is workflow. And what Kahn taught me first is that unlike getting SMEs in a room and saying, "What does a learner need?" Right, and we know that they'll tell us. Yeah. In no uncertain terms, what a learner needs. He's like, look, the first pivot is the workflow. If you're gonna target apply, we have to have a different conversation with those we serve about what is the work that the learner goes back to, not what they have to do, frankly, or the software they have to learn. Those are means to an end. Right. What we have to first understand is what is the workflow in which apply occurs, problems come up, and in which I have to remain current. And so he coined this thing called rapid workflow analysis, which is where we sit down with the same group, guys, the SMEs, same group. And we ask a very different question. It's like, look, I don't want to know the journey you took to get to where you are, and therefore everything someone who should be you should know. That's really what we've asked historically and new and more. It's like, look, what do you do? Right. You're a SME in the context of work. I don't necessarily, frankly, care about your aptitude of that you're a SME, but what you're saying by being a SME is you know the work intimately. Yeah. Now, this is an interesting conversation because, you guys, when I went to do one of my first RWAs, I got what I was told were SMEs in the work, and they were managers. It was, to be very specific, it was a sales training problem. And so the SMEs I was sent were sales managers. Well, guess what about those sales managers? They hadn't sold in the work in 5 years at least. But I remember, guys, these are the same people I would love in a room for a course. Right. I mean, right. They would tell me all the things they want sales reps to know and do in that order, by the way, know and do. But when I said, look, just give me a day in the life of your reps. Oh, I haven't been in the territory. Or they'd say, well, this is what they do. This is what they're supposed to be doing. And then I would get sales reps in the room and go, so I was told this is what you're supposed to be doing. And they're like, oh, no one does that. We haven't done that in years, or that part, or that part of the sales process never works. So instead, this is how we do it. Right. Guys, it was a transformational moment for me because when I got them in and had that conversation, I realized for years, honestly, how my training had missed the work. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like the real work. I mean, is that making sense? It was really an incredible pivot for me because I had done needs analysis for 20 years and put poor people in front of me who knew nothing and fire hose them, if I may. I'm going with my world with everything that an expert wants them to become and know. And they're sitting there going, terrific. Tomorrow I go back to wherever and do I use all this? Is it important? Is it, you know what I mean? Exactly. It was so eye-opening for me as an L&D professional to see the people I was supposed to be designing for through that lens. Yes. So RWA, rapid workflow analysis, Stephanie, super important in the journey of understanding the nature of the application I'm designing for. before I frankly even design even before I build anything.
Yep. I agree.
So I think my second part, real quick, and I warned you earlier.
Oh, no, sure.
I can rant and rave here. So there's two other critical points, and I'll try to be a little bit more specific. The other thing is that so what am I going to build, and what am I going to blend? Right? We love blended learning in our business.
Yeah.
Two things real quick. Well, number one, the first deliverable I build is not a training deliverable, although that's coming. I build what's called a digital coach or an embedded workflow tool. EPSS was the old acronym, because I'm aiming for apply. So I'm going to build for apply first and try to build an environment and a tool that will allow them to sustain, even learn on their own in the context of work, what they have to do. Now, the reality is I've never built one of those that can stand alone and just give it to them. Right. But that's my first deliverable. My second then is what we call targeted training, which is, okay, look, stuff still has to get trained. You can't, there's very few jobs on the world that you can say, learn through doing. Here's a digital coach. You might fail, but you can pick yourself up. No, some things if I fail at, people die, I get fired, or we get sued.
Yeah.
Right. So if that's the criteria for the task, I'm training it.
Absolutely.
You really have a responsibility to train it. But where I'm trying to go with this is, it's called critical skills analysis, which is based on, and we have I can give you all these references. We have a 7-point rubric that weighs the task once the workflow has been identified and says, look, here's the task. If someone fails at this, what's the criticality of failure?
Right.
If it's a 5 or higher, it's bad. I mean, like bad things happen.
Yeah. We
are not going to give you a good digital coach and say, well, you know what, trial and error, but if it's a 4 or less, this was so hard, you guys, for me as an educator to let go of. If it's a 4 or less with a good digital coach, why wouldn't I learn, if I dare say, better? Yeah. If I learned it while doing it in the workflow. Yeah. And that was an ego thing, to be honest with you, for me to get past, because we think, right? Totally. Because right. And so I'll end here. You end up with targeted training, which tends to be a much smaller footprint, very focused, not a lot of content because it doesn't need to be. A digital coach for the blend back at work. And then that's the deliverable to the 5 moments. Yeah.
Nice. What about the solve and change? Does that fit there as well?
That's a terrific question, because the change is is actually the easier of the two relatively, because the digital coach, and this is where we kind of get into technology and like AI and stuff nowadays, frankly. But the digital coach has to have a way of saying, if I journey into an area and say, well, wait, this has changed. This is not the way you did it before. Or if it's something I've become rote in, the digital coach has to have a way to push. I get up in the morning and I log into my thing and it says 3 things have changed. I know you know how to do these. You do them all the time. These 3 things have changed. You got to look at this first. Go through this tutorial, whatever. Or maybe, frankly, depending on criticality, you got to go to this course. You really should go to this course before you go. Solve is a lot harder because, and it's one that, to be honest with you, this discipline still struggles with, although AI is going to help a lot, to be honest, is that a lot of times I fail because I don't know what I don't know. Therefore, I don't know the question I should have asked before I did it. You know where I'm going? And therefore, I failed. Now, failures are remarkable at teachers. It's probably the best one we have.
Oh, it is.
But it can be,
absolutely,
there's residuals to it that are scary, right? So some digital coaches are getting better at anticipating that, if that makes sense. And being able to prompt or intervene, but that's an immature side of this. This discipline. And again, AI, there's some remarkable things happening in that are going to help us get better, but it's still not. It's still the most difficult and painful. Of the 5 moments.
By far, I would absolutely agree with that. And I'm thinking too, for a lot of us, it may not be us who has this mindset, but we work with teams, maybe with managers or leaders who have this kind of training first rather than a performance first mindset. And I'm wondering what thoughts you have or what feedback or advice you might offer. How do we help people to move with us on a journey where we really are focused on performance first?
You folks are wonderful. Boy, you've done your homework. You guys, because this is the hurdle, right? I'm asked all the time, what are the things to get started? And, in the old days, it was like, well, you got to learn the methodology, or you have to figure out what a digital coach might mean to you. Guys, those are optics and logistics. They're hard. I get it, but they're super easy to pivot on, to be honest. Mindset is massive. Right. And I just wrote a blog just this morning on this idea that my professional challenge, I've been in this 20 years. My professional challenge has been helping people ask for a different deliverable because they are so steeped in training. We've taught them that training is the tip of the sword, frankly, by what we give them. Right. I mean, so and I, like I said, I came from an 6-year advanced degree in education. So I was totally wired in the training first mindset, right? So changing that in both those we serve so they'll let us do it in the first place. And us being willing to try it, probably second, I think is where you're going. And so what we've learned is that I'll get to your rapid fire questions later, but I'll share a quote during your rapid fire questions that kind of
where we're going.
Kind of changed. Yeah, kind of changed the whole thing for me, right? But any change management, if you've read a book on it or an article or a blog, or you have a PMI kind of thing, you're taught that there's change. You have to manage the change in a adoptable way. Right? You got to meet people where they are. They have to believe in and buy into the change. You can't force it, right? So in the early days of this, when we help L&D teams adopt this approach, we say, look, don't touch your training. Don't try to build a blended 5 moments thing, although someday you want to get there. It's too radical of a change for probably your department, to be honest, and definitely those that you've been serving forever, because they don't know you as this, and they're really and they're really going to buck when they see this. So build small interventions, low tech job aids. I mean, literally paper-based job aids. This is the crawl, walk, run of a digital coach, right? But you want to lead the horse to water, right? By little bites, and then to get it to where they're like, well, some of the first digital coaches we help people build are linked PDFs.
Right.
Simple linked PDFs, which PDFs and Word can do, right?
Yeah.
It's a lousy digital coach, to be honest with you. But if you don't have one, it's terrific. I mean, I don't have that kind of cool link to things. They grow tired of it pretty quick, but that's okay. You want them to go, well, is there a better mousetrap than this? I mean, I don't.
We'll learn from you.
And then you go, well, let me show you this. Let me show you this. and you open the kimono as the learner goes, I just love this. It's so helpful, but here's where it breaks down. Here's where it's not enough. Here's where it could be more automated. Here's where, when you start hearing these words, you're like, well, I have a better mousetrap. Right. But in the old days, my approach was, well, let me show you, the Grand Canyon here, and every time you guys
overwhelmed.
Every time they went, boy, that's terrific someday. And that last word meant
that closes the door. Every time.
So you're right, my friend. It's getting into where they come in one day and they stop asking for a training deliverable. They ask for a performance deliverable. That's the shift from a training to performance mindset.
That's where we want to go.
Now, I know before we get to the rapid fire questions, people are going to want to know more. So
they will.
Where do they need to go to learn more about you, this method, that kind of stuff?
Sure. The best place to go, friends, is 2 levels of this and whatever's helpful, right? We have actually 3, if I may, real quick. We have 5momentsofd.com with the number 5, all one word, has a plethora of resources on this stuff. White papers, ebooks, recordings that I've done, presentations, it's all up there, right? So that's right away. If you want to dig go deeper, we also have what's called the Workflow Learning Alliance, which is a free global community that you have to join. It's about it's going to cross 1,000 people this month, and it's people that are in the deep end of this. It doesn't mean you have to be there to join, but it gets intense. Then obviously, if I may, that's what my company does.
Yeah.
We help, if I can, we help organizations that say, look, I'd like to know more about this. I need help in doing it.
Yeah.
And then apply synergies if it's helpful, by all means. But please, those first two things, free to offer, helpful if they are, those would be the best ways to get started.
Awesome.
I think you'll have a lot of people reaching out. This is such important information to think about. I mean, this was just chock full of great ideas and strategies. I am really excited to try a few of these myself. But for the moment, anyway, I'm more excited about those last 3 questions that we have for you. So
let's go.
As all of our viewers and our listeners know, we always like to wrap up with what we call rapid fire. 3 questions, no more than 60 seconds or so to answer. Nice and quick, no problems there. Ready for the first one? Sounds like you are.
I am ready.
All right.
Go.
Give us one book that everyone must read and why.
Gloria Geary, Electronic Performance Support Systems. 1991 was when it was written. 91. Again, some people might be alive when they hear that date. But you guys, it's a short read, 100 and something pages. It has everything about the beginning of this discipline before we ever even knew the acronym. So it's a must read for folks if they want to understand this better.
I'll second that. It's on my bookshelf too, believe it or not.
Awesome. That's great.
Second question for you is, what is one tool that you can't live without?
I'm going to sound awful cliche here, you guys, but ChatGPT has been remarkable in my life, you guys. And at L&D Professionals, we got to know this thing. And by the way, not be afraid of it. Yeah. I don't know where that's coming from, candidly. We were afraid of the radio, I guess, at one time. But, look, I remember
the robots are taking over.
Well, organizations wouldn't let you send email. Remember that? Because they were afraid of company secrets leaking. Well, come on, you guys, really? It's honestly, guys, it's my mother passed recently, and 94 years old, God bless her. But, we had to write we had to write a eulogy. Yeah. And we were tired. We were emotionally done. Yeah. I went to ChatGPT and said, look, I know this wonderful 90 years lady. She passed. She lived in here. She did these in her life. Would you help me write her?
Oh,
yeah. It was. And by the way, the first thing ChatGPT said, first of all, condolences to your family.
Oh,
wow. Seriously.
Wow.
And then it wrote this remarkable thing, you guys, that my sisters and I then, we did some nip and tuck. But why wouldn't we want that as L&D developers to help us jumpstart, get to things quicker?
And use it every day.
It's a fantastic brainstorming partner. It really is. And what an interesting application.
Remarkable.
You never know when technology is going to give you the next thing that you desperately needed, but you didn't know how to ask. ChatGPT, I think, is that for learning and development.
Spectacular.
So great one. Last question for you today is this. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
When I was 21 years old and 22 years old and taking my first teaching job in Warsaw, New York, I had a really bad moment with a parent and a administrator. And I was a stubborn, new, going to change the world teacher. And my mother was in her 30-something year of it. And I called her up really upset that I was not being heard. And we have this in L&D once in a while, right? And everything I've talked about in this podcast kind of relates to that, because this is introducing, to your point question, Stephanie, a new thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even though it makes perfect sense, people will resist this. I'm telling you right now, even though it makes everything in the world. And I called my mom and I was like very frustrated. And she goes, look, Bob, here's the thing. You haven't learned this yet because you haven't been in the profession long enough. But here's the thing. Although there will be revolutionary methodologies and technologies in education, they will only ever be adopted in an evolutionary way.
Wow. And
I had tried to revolutionize Warsaw Elementary School, in a board meeting. And the horse bucked, and I couldn't understand why, although I made the most rational argument, that people just didn't openly go, oh my gosh, let's go. And that has served me, friends, throughout my career, because I have been through laser disc players a long time ago, e-learning on a tape drive, all the way to ChatGPT we just talked about. And we're the hosts of that journey, right? Both as adopters and so those are revolutionary things.
Yeah.
But we'll only get those we serve there in an evolutionary way if we're intentional and careful.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
I do too.
And now you have all these thoughts going to like card catalog to chat.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Our history right there.
Right there.
Yeah. My gosh. It's just some of them are kind of scary too.
I know.
Right? Remember Second Life? Remember Second Life? Oh my gosh.
Yes, I do.
Talk about,
yes, I do.
Talk about a utopian failure. I mean, but lessons learned.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. It's been an honor, friends. So appreciate your patience with my ranting and raving, but I hope
I love it. We love it. Yes. And of course, we want to thank our community for joining us as well. And before you go, we have a message from our producer, Halyna Hodges.
Are you interested in learning more about the Metro DC chapter of ATD or following us on social media? Go to dcatd.org and click on About.
Check out dcatd.org for upcoming chapter events, learning programs, member benefits, and so much more.